Hi guys, my name is Sam. I'm a dog nutritionist and owner of a chain of independent pet shops where every single week hundreds of dogs come through our doors and get their problems solved with nutrition. And today we have a treat. We are going to be reacting to veterinary advice TikToks, and there is going to be a lot of controversy. So I highly recommend you watch every single one. We are going to start with this one.
Yeah, don't ruin it for me.
I mean, you do have to feel for vets a lot of the time because sometimes they will get told the wildest things by us. And one of the things people sometimes do is they cater to what the dog wants. So if the dog happens to just want bread and chips, they just give the dog bread and chips. Or maybe they can just top up their kibble with whatever the dog wants. And that, to hear that from a veterinary standpoint, must be very, very tricky and quite disheartening. So try not to be that person. Whenever you're at the vet, try to not give the vet anything like that for them to think about. We are then going to move on to Dr. Nicole, and she's going to talk about the ultimate kibble brand.
Hey guys, it's Dr. Nicole. As a vet, I want to share with you what my number one kibble brand is for your pets. Just joking. You know I'm a fresh feeding vet, so that wouldn't align with me. But in all seriousness, I have a lot of pet parents that I see every day that do feed kibble. So this is what I share with them. Okay, my top tip of how to pick the best kibble for your pet if you choose to feed it. Turn over the back of the pack. Look at the ingredients panel, and I want you to make sure you're picking a kibble where the number one or first listed ingredient is an animal-based protein. Number one ingredient, animal-based protein. Then I want you to pick the product that you can find with the highest percentage of animal-based protein. I don't want any sneaky high protein counts that include a lot of plant-based protein because there's a different absorption for pets. Highest animal-based protein, and number one ingredient has to be an animal-based protein too.
So, wow, so she goes against the grain, really, when it comes to being a vet. Most vets are opposed to raw feeding or do not promote raw feeding, and there's a whole host of reasons why they don't, notwithstanding because people are lemons sometimes and they do not do it correctly. So I do feel for a lot of vets. However, what she's trying to instruct everybody is how to pick the best kibble, and she couldn't be any more right, in my opinion. I couldn't agree more. You want to be paying for meat, and you want to be paying for a lot of meat. Our animals are meat and bone eaters. So whenever you see a lot of the corn proteins, tapioca protein, rice protein, and things like that, those proteins aren't as good as animal proteins like lamb, chicken, deer, ostrich. Those proteins is what we want to pay for. We want to pay for protein in the supermarket, in the restaurant, and we want to pay for animal protein in pet food. So yes, she is the odd one out in the veterinary world.
What are some of the reasons why we as a group don't recommend feeding raw?
Salmonella. For sure.
The raw meat itself, listeria, salmonella, E. coli. I mean, if people aren't decontaminating correctly, then they take that bacteria and then they, transmit it around the house.
All over the place. Yeah.
So like pregnant women, shouldn't be feeding raw, formulas to their dogs. Immunocompromised people shouldn't be feeding raw. People think that it's all just about the dog, but you're right. It's also about the people, protecting the people as well.
Anytime I talk to people about raw feeding, I make the assumption that you are an adult and that you are responsible and that you aren't reckless. So if you are going to cross-contaminate, if you aren't going to wipe after preparing the raw food, if you are going to leave raw meat on the counter and not cover it and not prepare it properly and you're going to let it rot, obviously the risk of all these things happening kind of heightens. However, if you are responsible, if you do it correctly, these are all a bit of a boogeyman whenever it comes to raw feeding. People have been raw feeding for many, many decades now. Whenever we talk to people, we talk to reasonable people. If we aren't talking to someone reasonable, or you do not want to be reasonable when raw feeding, or you don't want to get into the habit of cleaning and preparing it properly and thawing it properly and preparing it correctly, don't do it. Feed a kibble. But this is a bit of scaremongering in my opinion.
As a veterinary nurse, I'm going to tell you, if your dog has red itchy skin, red ears, they're constantly scratching their ears or their face, they're licking their paws, they've got issues with their anal glands, or you just can't get on top of their upset stomach, you need to listen to this because your dog might have allergies. Allergies, just like in humans, they can either be environmental, so that can be anything within their environment, pollen, dust mites, soap powder, anything like that, or it can be food-based. If it is food-based, it is normally the protein source which causes it, but it can also be things like wheat.
It can also be breed specific. If you happen to have one of the breeds that has been tailored to look a very specific way, you can name XL Bullies, Blue Pit Bulls, Blue Labs, for example. French Bulldogs sometimes have inherent health issues, and one of them can be allergies. Burbles, South African Burbles, they're very prone to having allergies because of the way they are bred and because of the way it is, really. Certain breeds can also be prone to having allergies, but let's let the lady speak.
Gluten, grains, anything like that. So what you can do is you can get a blood test done at the vets. It'll cost you about £400. If you don't want to do that, you can first try a food exclusion diet. For the food exclusion diet, it can take quite a while. This is why people don't often do it, but you need to move your dog onto a novel protein based food. You can as well go grain free. There is some controversy over grain free food, stating that it can have links to DCM. Now, make your own opinion on this, do some research, have a look. Move them onto a novel protein. So novel protein's a protein source that they've likely never had before. Good ones that I normally recommend are duck and fish. They are both good. Move them onto a food that is single source protein. So if you're moving them onto a duck food, it needs to only have duck in it. No poultry fats, no anything, just duck. I'll do another video now and I'll link it to show you how to have a look and make sure the food is single source protein.
So that's pretty much textbook on how to do an elimination diet, and what she's alluding there to the poultry fat or poultry on some bags of dog food is a reference to prescription dog food diets, which we do not recommend because they are vague in the ingredients. So if you are trying to eliminate as many potential allergens as this lady is alluding to, wheat, barley, corn, soy, beef, meat and animal derivatives, various sugars, whatever, what we want to do is single out one single protein. What she's saying or she's recommending is duck or fish. But you can be a bit more out there. You can go for deer, you can go for goat, you can go for sardines, you can go for kangaroo, you can go for ostrich. Those proteins are going to be very, very hard for your dog to be reactive or allergic to. Your dog might be allergic to chicken or reactive to beef or whatever, but has your dog ever eaten ostrich? This is why a lot of people will move their dogs onto a vegan diet or one of these other diets, and they do not really solve the problem because your dog needs animal protein. Your dog needs good quality protein. And so what this lady is saying here is absolutely spot on. Whenever it comes to veterinary prescription diets, those will have natural flavors, they will have grains, and people are moving away from grains in pet food because they're inflammatory. If you put rice, for example, in a bag of dog food, that rice is going to expand. If you give your dog rice, the rice is going to be everywhere because they're not inherently designed to eat rice, for example. So a lot of these ingredients in prescription vet foods aren't good. They are vague, they're inflammatory, wheat gluten, corn gluten, and we do not recommend them. That's why what she's saying is spot on. Find a novel protein and see if that helps, and then you can add back any other proteins you might see fit. So you can try that for 2 weeks. You can try 2 weeks on kangaroo, and then you add ostrich, and then you have 2 different protein sources. So that's pretty much textbook.
Royal Canin dog food, is it any good? Hi guys, my name is Amir, I'm a veterinarian, and I've recently had to buy a bag of the standard Royal Canin dog food for a puppy that I was fostering, and I was actually very surprised when I looked at the ingredient list, and actually more so shocked that I've been recommending this food to many of my clients. So I want to go through the ingredients with you guys, and then we can all make an informed decision about what we think. So when looking at any dog food, guys, the ingredients on the top of the list are the ones that have the highest quantity in the food, and ideally you want your first ingredient to be a protein source, specifically a meat protein source. So let's take a look at what we have in these ingredients, guys. So the first ingredient is dehydrated poultry protein. So that's good. It's a protein source, poultry protein, meaning that we don't know exactly what bird it's coming from, but it's coming from some kind of poultry. Then we have maize flour, animal fats, and maize gluten. So it really annoyed me about seeing this is that there are 3 different kinds of maize in there. So maize flour, and maize gluten. These are all separate ingredients. That means that if we were to add all the maize ingredients, would there be much more maize in this diet than they're letting on? So would maize have to be the primary ingredient in this Royal Canin diet had they added all the different kinds of maize together? And guys, maize is not a good ingredient. No matter what anyone tries to tell you, maize has a high glycemic index. It doesn't have many vitamins or minerals compared to other similar foods like it. Even soluble fiber is not that great. So maize is not some sort of amazing ingredient, and the fact that there's so much...
Well, the quality of the food is definitely in question, and they rely on extremely good marketing. I mean, Royal Canin is at the top in terms of marketing. They are geniuses at marketing their services. Over many, many years, they have been sponsoring and paying veterinary schools here in the UK and all over the world, and they have been funding all sorts of things. They have given away free bags of dog food. All this has been very well documented, and we have done extensive videos on it. They are extremely entrenched in AFCO, in FEDIAF. They sponsor pretty much everything, and so they have the appearance that they are the best when it comes to dog food. As Dr. Amir says here, maize isn't a good food at all. It's not a very good ingredient. I would never give my dog maize. I don't think it's biologically appropriate for our dogs. As he says, it's a high glycemic carbohydrate. It's inflammatory. You can almost make the one-to-one correlation between fast food in humans and maize and a lot of these ingredients that veterinary prescription diets have. So McDonald's for dogs? Absolutely not.
I get hit with ads for so many different kinds of dog food. Grain-free, raw, fresh, even vegan. What would a vet recommend? I know that pet owners want to feed their pets the best way possible. And I also know that it is incredibly confusing when you walk into a store that sells pet food to decide what to feed. There are so many options, so many different varieties, so many flavors. All these strategies are in play. A lot of the bigger food companies that also make prescription diets for dogs and cats have done a ton of research around how to optimally feed sick animals, right? So if your animal has a medical condition and your veterinarian has prescribed a specific diet, definitely you want to stick to that.
Could not disagree more. If your dog, for example, has diabetes or pancreatitis, it's very, very likely that your vet might recommend one of these veterinary prescription diets with a bunch of carbohydrates. Now, excess carbohydrates turn into triglycerides within the liver, into excess fats within the liver. So a food can be low fat or can be whatever they want for pancreatitis or diabetes. But at the end of the day, if you overeat and if you combine a lot lot of these high glycemic carbohydrates, highly palatable foods, and you overfeed your dog, then those carbohydrates are going to convert into fat. And you can do this at home. If you are diabetic, the worst thing you can do is eat pasta 7 times a day, because those excess carbohydrates are then going to convert into triglycerides. You're going to spike insulin levels, your pancreas is already compromised. And so the advice sometimes vets have or vets give when it comes to certain conditions sometimes is absolutely dismal, and we see this every single day, especially when it comes to dogs having certain conditions and vets prescribing a standard bag of dog food which is very, very carb heavy, and those excess carbohydrates are then going to cause hyperlipidemia, which is excess fat in the blood. So I could not disagree more with this lady.
Where it gets harder is how to choose a food for your healthy pet, right? Unfortunately, there aren't a lot of studies out there that tell us what is the optimal way to feed a healthy pet. What we basically know is the macronutrient profile, right? Fats, carbohydrates, and proteins. What are the optimal ratios to feed those in? When we look at the scale between like complete vegetarian all the way over to complete carnivore, right? Our cats fall more along the scale of being complete carnivores. They typically don't need a lot of other aspects of their diet. Dogs are more like people, right? They're kind of in the center. They're what we call omnivorous. Feeding them.
Dogs are absolutely not omnivores. They are scavenging carnivores or opportunistic carnivores. They have many, many traits of carnivores. They have canines, they have carnassial teeth, their mouths don't allow for sideways movement, they have a very undeveloped cecum, they don't have an enzyme that breaks down carbohydrates in the mouth or starches in the mouth called amylase, they have short stomachs, they can eat up to 10% in their body weight in one sitting, akin of carnivores. So dogs are more carnivores than anything else. They're more carnivorous than anything else. The notion and telling people that dogs are omnivores and because they are omnivores they can eat just like us, that is absolutely ridiculous in my opinion. And also what she is saying here is that we should only look at carbohydrates, proteins and fats. Well, what she's not saying, what she's not telling you is that dogs can actually make their own blood sugar from protein and fat in a process called gluconeogenesis. They do not have any dietary requirement for carbohydrates whatsoever. And these are some things that the veterinary industry sometimes leave out or they conveniently omit and they tell you otherwise. But she's a vet, I am not, and so maybe you should trust her, right?
Is a little bit more challenging from that respect. Interestingly enough, I think a lot of trends or fads in human diets have worked their way into the pet world as well. Maybe 5 to 7 years ago, we started seeing a lot of grain-free diets for dogs emerge. What then started to happen, because these diets often not only were grain-free, but they used a lot of really unusual meat sources. They put in what we call pulses, which come from legumes, right? Lentils, peas, things like that. We started seeing dogs develop a condition known as dilated cardiomyopathy, which is
So that has largely been debunked, and there is a very big lawsuit between some of the involved parties. So this TikTok might have been prior to the lawsuit, and so I'm not gonna disagree with this lady or harp on that point for too long. What I will agree with her on is that the consumer is now absolutely overwhelmed with the amount of information. We have grain, no grain, veterinary prescription diets, we have vegan dog foods, we have all sorts of wild claims made by different people and different brands, and there is a lot of information there. So I do agree with this lady. Now, she would be what I call the consensus. She would be like your corporate vet. And again, the big three, Royal Canin, Purina and Hills, they have a lot of interests and they sometimes have shareholding interests in some of the biggest veterinary chains in the world. So that's why your vet sometimes can only recommend certain brands of food because we apply to be actually a partner here in the UK in the biggest veterinary chain, and we could only sell what they want wanted you to sell, which is Royal Canin and Purina, because they have contractual agreements. So this is up to you to either agree with the consensus or agree with people who are a bit more focused on ingredients than anything else.
Abby, what kind of food do you feed your dogs?
I feed the Purina Pro Plan small breed with the Frenchie on there, the chicken and rice formula.
Beautiful choice.
Yeah.
Destiny, what kind of food do you feed your dogs?
Purina, sensitive skin and stomach, salmon and rice, and then Sadie's on the Royal Canin SO.
Thank you.
This is again your wheat glutens, your corn, your barley, your rice. Rice expands when you cook it, so if you can do this at home, you can put rice in a pot and it will likely double. So whenever a manufacturer puts rice in the recipe and it's only 10% or 15%, it's more than 10% once you cook it. So that's a very sleazy way for manufacturers to give you more rice, which is a lot cheaper than lamb, is a lot cheaper than chicken, and is a lot cheaper than any other meat source. These foods are very carb heavy, and these ladies are feeding them what the consensus tells you.
Yeah. What kind of food do you feed your dogs?
Purina Pro Plan, the sensitive stomach one, and
What's the protein?
salmon. And then the other one gets either lamb and rice or chicken and rice.
Thank you.
Ribby,
Yes.
what food do you feed your pet?
Purina Pro Plan sensitive skin and stomach, salmon and rice.
Perfect. That's so good. That's so good.
So again, this is the consensus. The consensus is to feed your dog the sensitive stomach one. And this lady is feeding salmon, rice, barley, fish meal. So it's not just salmon, but fish meal as well. We then have beef fat. So even though you are trying to eliminate a few potential allergens and a few potential sources of protein, you are still feeding your dog beef, which is one of the three main potential allergens we see all the time. Beef, wheat, and chicken tend to be the most common offenders when it comes to these. We then have pea protein, pea fiber, natural flavor. Natural flavor, again, where is the flavor coming from? Tell me precisely where it is coming from. But again, these ladies aren't interested in the ingredients. They are interested in the nutritional profile and all the add-ons and all the bells and whistles. And so it is incumbent upon you to make the decision what you want to do. Do you want to follow the consensus and you are happy with what you are being told by corporations and by most vets? Or you are doing a bit more digging, you are curious, and you come to channels like this one to maybe be a bit more skeptical about the whole thing. So let me know what you think, and I'll see you in the next one.